Russian ship attacks Ukrainian jet, then pays the heaviest price. 2:45 a.m., September 21, 2025. The calm waters off Yevpatoria, Crimea, suddenly and without warning broke apart. A Russian mp4 warship, an $85 million warship designed to launch missiles in enclosed waters, locked its radar on a Ukrainian MiG-29 patrol plane flying at 14,000 feet. Within seconds, a $2.5 million missile was hurtling skyward at nearly Mach 3. The warhead ripped through the MiG's right wing, slicing off 150 square feet of metal and sending the plane into a deadly spin. At that point, it was no longer a matter of deploying a new weapon, but of pursuing it. A deliberate act of aggression, an ambush calculated to intimidate. But instead of fear, it sparked rage. Within minutes, a Ukrainian counterattack of 950 suicide drones turned the Russian floating fortress into a sea of fire. So what will happen to Russia? Can Ukraine, with these cheap UAVs, break through Russia's formidable defenses? At exactly 2:45 a.m. on September 21, 2025, the pitch-black waters off Yevpatoria, Crimea, were supposed to be calm. Yet, anchored less than 70 miles from the Ukrainian front lines, a Russian mp4 warship, worth more than $85 million, was preparing for what Moscow proudly called a 3M-22 Zircon missile launch of a new multi-purpose weapon system. Official reports claimed it was routine. In fact, the ship's radar had locked onto a Ukrainian MiG-29 patrol aircraft without its knowledge. The MiG-29, flying at 14,000 feet on a routine surveillance route, was a symbol of perseverance. The Ukrainian pilot, a 27-year-old with less than 400 flight hours under his belt, had no idea that the warship's phased array radar had already determined a firing solution. Suddenly, at 2:47 a.m., a nearly $2.5 million missile roared into the sky at Mach 2.8. In just 22 seconds, it closed the gap. The warhead hit the MiG's right wing, instantly cutting off 150 square feet of surface area and igniting a fuel line. The jet spun violently, alarms blaring in the cockpit. The pilot ejected at just 1,200 feet above sea level, his seat throwing him into the frigid air before his parachute opened. He plunged into the Black Sea with tremendous force, his body hitting the water at just 54 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to induce hypothermia in less than 20 minutes. Stranded, disoriented, and battered by the waves, he clung to life as the wreckage of his MiG-29 disappeared beneath the surface, awaiting rescue. On board the Russian ship, officers raised their glasses to celebrate the successful deployment of the new 3M-22 Zircon missile. For them, it was a show of force. But for Ukraine, the downing of a frontline jet with a so-called new-generation missile launch was nothing less than a deliberate provocation. The distress signal sent by the pilot was immediately picked up by the Mykolaiv command, causing shock, outrage, and urgency. In less than 13 minutes, what started as a secret ambush had become a crisis that reshaped the battlefield. The stage was set for a measured counterattack, not by a single missile, but by hundreds of drones. A storm designed to turn the Russian floating fortress into a sea of fire. The distress signal from the downed MiG-29 reached the Mykolaiv command at 2:58 a.m. The room fell silent as officers looked at the flashing coordinates. 27 miles offshore, the pilot had ejected in critical condition. For a moment, disbelief filled the air. A frontline fighter jet worth $45 million had been destroyed in less than half a minute by what Russia sarcastically called a new class of missile. For Ukrainian commanders, this was no routine operation. It was a calculated execution. General Serhiy Melnik, head of Ukraine's Southern Air Command, slammed his fist on the operations table. His words cut like steel. If they wanted to send a message, we'll answer with fire. Within minutes, the order went out. Operation Black Storm. Its weapon would not be a handful of jets or a single missile strike, but a swarm of 950 improvised UAVs, the largest drone assault Ukraine had ever attempted. The numbers alone were staggering. Each UAV cost less than $3,000, cobbled together in hidden workshops using motorcycle engines, fiberglass, and commercially available explosives. In total, the swarm represented less than $2.9 million in hardware, a fraction of the value of one Russian cruise missile. Yet, its destructive potential was designed to rival a full missile barrage. The plan was precise and layered. 200 drones would climb to 1,500 feet, broadcasting false signatures to blind Russian radar screens with phantom echoes. 200 more would serve as sacrificial rams, diving head-on into the Bayan-M's Pantsir S-1 defense system, overwhelming its 36 ready-to-fire missiles and forcing gunners into a frenzy of wasted fire. The remaining 550 drones, the killing wave, would skim just 12 feet above the waves, programmed to strike fuel tanks, ammunition depots, and critical command modules. Every operator in Mykolaiv knew the stakes. If even 5% of the drones broke through, the warship's fate was sealed. At 3:05 a.m., launch crews across 3 coastal sites prepared their rails. Engines sputtered, navigation modules lit green. The countdown began. Ukraine was about to unleash a storm not measured in tons of steel, but in sheer numbers and relentless precision. Don't miss what happens next. Like, subscribe, and follow us to see what happens next in this battle. At 3:20 a.m., the skies above the Black Sea erupted. From 3 hidden Ukrainian launch sites, 950 UAVs rose like a swarm of steel hornets, their engines buzzing against the silence of night. Radar operators aboard the Russian Bayan-M suddenly saw their screens light up with dozens, then hundreds of contacts. It was chaos in green and red pixels. What looked like a missile barrage worth billions was, in reality, less than $3 million of improvised hardware. The Russian crew snapped to action. The ship's Podlet K-1 radar immediately tracked more than 320 separate signals within its 40-mile perimeter. "Multiple inbound objects!" one officer shouted. Alarm screamed through the vessel as the Pantsir S-1 air defense system was activated. With a maximum rate of 4,500 rounds per minute from its twin autocannons and 36 ready-to-launch missiles, it was designed to handle swarms. But this was not a handful. It was a tidal wave. The first 200 Ukrainian drones climbed to 1,500 feet, deliberately mimicking the radar signature of cruise missiles. The Russian screens filled with ghost targets. Commanders couldn't tell real from fake. They ordered volleys of interceptors, each missile worth nearly $80,000, to swat down drones costing less than $3,000. Within minutes, over $6.5 million in ammunition was gone, yet the wave kept coming. Then came the second wave, 200 suicide UAVs. Flying low and fast, they hurled themselves at the Bayan-M's defenses. The night sky lit up with streaking tracers and blossoms of fire as cannon shells shredded some drones mid-air. But others slipped through, detonating against the outer hull and fragmenting radar dishes. The defensive gunners were now firing almost blindly, their magazines depleting at a terrifying rate. Amid the storm, the killing wave arrived. 550 drones, hugging the sea at just 12 feet altitude, surged forward like predators closing in. At 95 miles per hour, the swarm closed the last 5 miles in under 4 minutes. Russian sailors fired every weapon left, pistols, rifles, even flares in desperation. But the Bayan-M's layered defenses had already cracked. The sea glowed with fireballs, shattered wings, and splashes of burning fuel. The ship's gunners were drenched in sweat, their ears ringing from non-stop cannon fire. In the chaos, one officer screamed, "Targets everywhere! No clear lock!" Yet the drones pressed closer, forming a wall of buzzing steel. By 3:26 a.m., the Bayan-M had already expended nearly 70% of its ready ammunition, and the swarm was still thick. The air reeked of gunpowder and burning oil. What began as a confident defense was turning into a desperate, losing battle. The defenses are cracking. What happens when the drones finally hit their mark? Stay with us, the answer is seconds away. At 3:27 a.m., the Russian Bayan-M was already staggering under the weight of relentless assault. Its Pantsir S-1 cannons glowed red from overheating, ammunition stores were down by 72%, and nearly $12 million in interceptors had been wasted on decoys. But the true strike force had only just arrived. Out of the 550 low-flying drones, more than 480 remained intact, a number no warship in history had ever faced simultaneously. They advanced in staggered formations, guided by inertial systems immune to jamming. Each carried a 15-pound explosive charge, small individually, but catastrophic in mass. The first impact slammed into the starboard side. 12 drones struck within seconds, tearing open sections of the outer hull plating. Sparks ignited exposed cables. Then came another wave, nearly 40 drones, diving directly onto the deck. One punched through an access hatch into the auxiliary control room, killing 3 sailors instantly. The Bayern-M lurched, tilting 6 degrees starboard, alarms shrieking. But the deadliest blow was yet to come. At 3:29 a.m., a cluster of 18 drones broke through the last defensive arc and aimed at the ship's most vulnerable heart, the fuel tanks and forward ammunition magazines. One drone detonated against a port-side fuel reservoir containing nearly 12,000 gallons of naval diesel. The explosion created a fireball visible from 15 miles away, blasting temperatures over 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit across the deck. Seconds later, 2 more drones struck the munitions hold. Inside, crates of 122mm shells, anti-air missiles, and spare caliber components ignited in a chain reaction. The deck erupted in a thunderous secondary blast, steel plating bent outward like torn paper. Fragments weighing over 300 pounds were hurled into the night sky. The shockwave tore antennas from their mounts and shattered portholes across the vessel. In under 90 seconds, the Bayern-M went from embattled to fatally crippled. Fires consumed the command tower. Internal sprinklers failed under heat overload. Crew members scrambled in panic. Many leapt into the sea, their silhouettes swallowed by firelight. Casualties mounted rapidly. Dozens burned, crushed, or thrown overboard. By 3:31 a.m., the Bayern-M was a floating inferno. Witnesses described it as a volcano on water. The once prized warship, hailed as a floating fortress worth billions in strategic value, had become a funeral pyre. Its offensive power was gone, its defenses obliterated, and its crew scattered in terror. The impossible had happened. Homemade drones costing less than a family car had annihilated one of Russia's most modern strike vessels. By 3:40 a.m., the Bayern-M was no longer a warship. It was a burning carcass adrift on the Black Sea. Emergency transmissions screamed across encrypted naval channels. Flagship incapacitated. Radar destroyed. Ammunition detonated. Request immediate evacuation. But the pleas came too late. Satellite reconnaissance confirmed the scale of destruction. A vessel that once carried 8 caliber cruise missiles capable of striking targets nearly 1,000 miles away had been reduced to twisted steel in under 12 minutes. Intelligence estimated that out of the crew of 78 sailors and officers, at least 41 were dead or missing, while dozens more suffered burns, shrapnel wounds, or hypothermia as they floundered in the sea. The economic shock was staggering. Ukraine's $2.9 million drone swarm had neutralized a ship worth over $85 million in construction costs and hundreds of millions more in strategic value. In effect, a fleet cornerstone was erased for less than 1/30,000th the price of a single caliber missile it carried. Western analysts quickly branded the attack the $3 million strike that rewrote naval warfare. For Russia's Black Sea Fleet, the blow went beyond material loss. Teryak Bay, once deemed impenetrable, was exposed as a death trap. Confidence among Russian crews collapsed. Reports surfaced of sailors refusing to berth their ships overnight within range of Ukrainian drones. Commanders were forced to divert vessels hundreds of miles east, abandoning key positions along Crimea's coast. Internationally, the symbolism was explosive. A superpower's advanced warship had fallen to tools improvised in workshops using off-the-shelf parts. The message was clear. In the 21st century, victory would not be dictated solely by billion-dollar platforms, but by numbers, ingenuity, and timing. For Ukraine, it was more than retribution. It was proof that David could still strike Goliath. And for Russia, it was a chilling reminder. No fortress, no fleet, no bay is safe when the swarm comes. The ambush began at midnight with a single missile tearing a Ukrainian MiG-29 out of the sky. For Moscow, it was a show of force, a new Class 3 M22 Zircon missile, disguised as routine training. But by dawn, the cost of the provocation had increased 100-fold. In less than 45 minutes, Ukraine had turned anger into precision. A swarm of 950 homemade drones, worth less than $3 million, destroyed a warship worth more than $85 million, along with an arsenal of 8 caliber cruise missiles capable of hitting cities nearly 1,000 miles away. The Bayern-M, once hailed as the floating fortress of the Black Sea, was reduced to twisted steel and drifting flames. The damage was not limited to hardware. Of the 78 crew members, more than 40 never returned home. Russia's offensive power in the region was reduced by nearly 15% overnight, forcing the entire Black Sea Fleet to retreat and go on the defensive. Naval analysts have likened the attack to a mini Pearl Harbor, a turning point that rewrote the balance of power with weapons no larger than a human arm. For Ukraine, the message was clear. Ingenuity can trump firepower, and numbers can trump steel. For Russia, the illusion of safe harbor was gone forever. No harbor, no bay, no so-called fortress could protect against the silent storm of cheap drones. And for the world, the lesson was dire. The era of billion-dollar warships dominating the seas was over. From this point on, the battlefield will not belong only to the steel giants, but also to the swarms of small machines that strike with precision and relentlessness. If you think this analysis deserves a listen, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment with your thoughts, because what is happening off the coast of Crimea is not just a war for Ukraine. It is a glimpse into the future of war itself.